As we count down the days to Las Vegas, I'm connecting with speakers, sponsors, and industry experts to get a pulse on what we can expect to see at Enterprise Connect 2026.
Hi, Eric Williamson, the Chief Marketing Officer at a company called CallMiner. CallMiner is a CX automation player in the CX automation space, obviously. So we have been around for a little while, but we've got an offering of conversation intelligence powering AI automation, so voice bots, chat bots, etc. And happy to be here today.
Eric, it is great to connect with you as we are counting down the days to Enterprise Connect. Before we know it, you and I will both be together in Las Vegas. And ahead of that, I thought it would be interesting to have a conversation with you on a couple fronts. One, events like EC are always a buzz, we'll say, of what are the hot topics, what's the pulse of what's really happening in the industry. So let's talk about some of those things. Maybe we can look at how people can make the most of their conference experience.
Sure.
But maybe even most importantly, the event aside, what really matters is what happens when we all head home and put ideas into practice. That's actually where I want to start. Enterprise Connect is one of those events where a lot of business leaders will probably be reevaluating what's on the roadmap, what are the plans for the months and years ahead. And I'm curious from what you see with enterprise leaders, as they're mapping out that, let's call it even 3-year CX roadmap, where do you see the most often disconnecting between the vision and the strategy and what actually gets put into practice?
Sure. So regardless of Enterprise Connect, but I do have some advice on people going, how to get the most of it, and maybe we'll get to that. But first and foremost, I think you're being gracious that all these enterprise companies have a 3 to 5 year roadmap.
Not anymore, right?
Yeah, and I think it would be great if they all did, but in my observation, very few of them actually do. And I think some of it comes down to just natural human behavior. You get stuck kind of doing a lot of the same things that you built your career on, and I'm specifically talking about CX leaders primarily here. And in their case, that means, we're going to continue to use legacy surveys as our main source of data, etc. But I think let's think optimistically and think that there's a 3 to 5 year plan. I think the best way to think about it so you don't fall into the typical pitfalls is you still have to hit your performance numbers, you still have to do NPS and CSAT and everything else. So there's 80% of your operation probably remains somewhat familiar, and then you leave about 20%, which you need to be investing some of your budget in innovations. A couple reasons why. One, if you don't innovate, you're going to find yourself out of a job and your company in a bad spot. But two, I promise you right now, your CEO is likely asking you about AI strategy and everything else. So you better have some innovation planned. I think the biggest things I would advise is the things that I think companies fall into a trap. A lot of it has to do in that 80% fundamentals. It's their data. So it's not a lack of data. There's data all over the place, but that's actually the problem. If you really think about CX leaders, in many cases they span multiple departments. They have representatives in marketing and customer success and ops, etc. And that becomes problematic because what you have is maybe legacy survey data sitting in multiple department stacks. And then if you're a forward-thinking company and you're actually doing conversation intelligence where you're analyzing every form of interaction, even that data is sort of siloed in the contact center in different places. So ensuring that your data is organized and not fragmented. Well, first and foremost, ensuring you're not just using surveys, but ensuring that if you are using all these different forms of data, that you actually have it organized in some sort of data lake, something that is central that you're able to tap into and able to use those insights to drive your CX strategy. And it needs to be reciprocal. It needs to be something that isn't just stagnant. So you need to be measuring that against, okay, we took the following actions based on these CX insights. Did any of these work? Did we improve this, that, and the other? And if not, then go back to that data and make sure you're using it in a flexible way.
3 things I want to reinforce that you called out there. One is the horizon by which we're planning, and I agree with you. I think a lot of folks, it's gotten shorter and shorter on many fronts. It feels like it's compressing every day right now.
I feel like most people get stuck in this 12-month rut, and every year they do their annual planning, but I would hope that we're going to see more people get into at least a 24-month cycle, but we'll see.
Yeah. Second thing, Eric, I think is interesting is when we let our reflex or our muscle memory kick in to that point of like we go back to what we're comfortable and what's familiar, recognizing that change innovation is not quick, it is not easy, it causes some level of discomfort. And if we don't acknowledge that and step into it, that certainly will get us back into place. And the last thing is somebody recently has talked about triple D, and I thought it was diners, drive-ins, and dives. Turns out it's dirty, disparate data. And that's the thing that you talked about there of got to be careful about these decisions.
I'm going to steal that phrase. Yeah, that's great. No, that's a good way to describe probably one of the biggest pitfalls, other than organizational silos and things like that, but just lack of a true amount of data that spans all the customer interactions, but then silos and all the things we talked about. Those are the typical pitfalls we see, and we try to help our customers avoid as the core of our business is conversation intelligence, so we help them with that.
Yeah, so let's actually talk about that for a minute. If I'm a leader watching this, what's your take on how I can be better using my customer conversation data to guide my decisions, not just around business strategy, but also around technology? I think it's easy to fall into whatever is being the latest hype or trend or the vendor narrative. So how can I be better informed and better decisioned on what I'm doing in my enterprise?
Sure. Hype is the right word. I think we're on the tail end of, if you're familiar with like the Gartner hype cycle or whatever, I guess we're beyond the trough of disillusionment now. But 2022 to 2024-ish really was all hype. A lot of hype and I guess optimistic hype of what it could deliver. And then what you had was a lot of enterprise companies, we call it, the FOMO. They better be doing something. So they just were sort of grasping at anything without any real governance or understanding of where it should be put into the workflow. So I think we're moving beyond that. As far as how conversation intelligence can help you with this. I mean, at its core, conversation intelligence is about using all those millions of interactions to give you insights into your customer first and foremost, but also where you should be applying new technologies. So I'll give you an example. So our company has conversation intelligence at its core, but then also we offer AI automation as some of the actual things that go out and touch your customers, voice bots, chat bots, etc. Without the intelligence, we wouldn't really even know which parts of the workflow we should be automating. So you really have to have that conversation intelligence to help inform that. I'll give you a little bit, go down a level. So if conversation intelligence is analyzing all those interactions, it's actually analyzing call drivers and reasons why people call in and different areas of sentiment depending on where they are in the customer journey. So these types of information can tell you what things might need to be automated versus what things probably should stay with a human. It's pretty high touch. So the combination of those two things is really important. There's a lot of voice and chatbot players out there at this point, but many of them are still basically rules-based IVR. They really aren't as intelligent as they should be.
Maybe this is leading the witness here, but on that front, if you think about the next 12 months for CX leaders, what do you think is the thing that if you could pick one thing for them to focus on and get right at the end of this next year, what would that thing be?
So we've already started talking about it, but AI automation, hands down. I think you're going to see a lot of innovation when it comes to legacy surveys as well, and making sure those are a little bit more contextual and trigger-based, but I'll focus on, when I say AI automation, I'm talking about voice bots and chat bots, so AI agents that are replacing humans to some degree for parts of the customer experience. I think that is, people are already exploring it. Out of all of our customers, close to 100% of them are either have actively started using AI agents in some form. Everybody's been using chatbots for some time, but voice bots are becoming really big now too. So I think over the next 2 years, there's going to be a lot of, let's call it experimentation and figuring out, how to optimize how you're deploying these voice and chat bots appropriately across the customer journey. So I think, going back to how intelligence informs that, I think the biggest thing is it's going to help you understand where in those workflows and the customer journeys you should actually be applying perhaps a bot as opposed to leaving it to be human-based. I would always advise you start out a little small and then you expand on that based on actual learnings. Another thing I would advise is there's a bit of a myth out there. I don't know if this is just a lack of AI understanding, but people like to think that you can deploy an AI bot, whether it's chat or voice, and easy button, it just starts working perfectly. And it's the farthest thing from the truth. there's no irony lost on me that it's actually a lot like when you hire a human. You've got a onboarding and you've got a knowledge base and training you have to train this bot with. And then once you deploy it, you're closely monitoring, especially during that first few weeks and months. You're closely monitoring and having to constantly optimize those bots based on what you're seeing it happen in real time. I think we're already starting to see this part, but we're getting to a place now where you're going to be able to have bots actually do the training of some of your new bots, which would be interesting, but we're not there yet. Lastly, just be flexible and be willing to, you could have had a good hypothesis of where you should have deployed this bot, but, basically fail fast, remove that one, optimize it, and move on.
Yeah. I had this, it's like moments like this. I remember one of my mentors had a phrase that was care deeply, fight passionately, hold loosely. Yes. And we are certainly in a season where we do need to hold loosely. We need to be able to test, fail fast, and then iterate and keep evolving. And to that earlier point of familiarity and comfort, it's going to test us in a lot of ways. And I think we should be excited and encouraged by that, because on the other side of it is going to be a level of experience delivery, of intelligence that I think is unlike anything we've ever seen.
I agree, and I failed to mention this, but I think it's important and worth talking about or whatever, but I think most companies are leaning into the idea of chatbots and voice bots replacing humans in some parts of those customer experience journeys, and the immediate reason is cost reduction. And it makes total sense, we're business people, but I think if that's the only driver for you making that decision, I think you're missing a real big opportunity, and that has to do with which parts of the journey you should be automating in the first place. So I would not sleep on gathering the intelligence, hopefully with conversation intelligence, but in some way to figure out which parts of that your customers will appreciate talking to a bot as opposed to a human agent, and which parts they would probably fire you if they were forced to go and talk to a voice bot as opposed to a human, because it's such a high-touch situation.
Really, really good advice, Eric. And what I love about this conversation is it's exactly like the kinds that can and will be happening at Enterprise Connect, whether you are in a breakout session, whether you're coming by the CallMiner booth and seeing this stuff in action. That's what this is all about, right? It's about asking questions. It's about understanding what is real right now, what's relevant to every single one of us in our operations, and then using that to make decisions. Maybe on that front, I've got two more questions for you. Sure. Enterprise Connect will have a lot going on between those different breakout sessions, between exhibitors that are there, all sorts of different social functions. Talk to me specifically about CallMiner this year. What are the things that you really are helping businesses do better, and why might I want to stop by and see your team? What are you going to help me understand and figure out?
Sure. Booth 727. If I get this wrong, my head of events is going to kill me. But we're at booth 727, so we're excited and we look forward to seeing everybody. We've talked a lot about it, but to sound like a broken record, but CX automation is what I want anybody to come by our booth and talk about that with us, and in particular, intelligent CX automation, and why that is so important. We like to think about it as an infinity loop where you've got conversation intelligence actually informing the AI automation and your AI bots, but also the real-time guidance and augmentation that happens. And all of that is just a continuous loop. So we like to think about that as sort of an end-to-end CX automation offering, which is what our platform does. So come by. My advice for anyone going to the show, and I do hope you stop by our booth, is do some research in terms of like the exhibit hall. If you've never been to Enterprise Connect, it's massive. And it can be a little bit overwhelming if you go in just completely blind. So do some research. Look at some Forrester Waves and look at some Magic Quadrants and different things to pick out a few vendors that you want to stop by. Of course, stop by the ones that look pretty cool and are serving beer, of course, whatever. But make a plan. Same thing for the breakouts of those that you're able to balance your day out. When you get to these booths, my biggest thing would be ask them to do demos. I think we get into a situation where, going back to the hype cycle, there's a lot of promises out there, but can they actually demo it? Can they show it? Is it GA or is it just a concept of a plan? So ask them to show it. And then, what tends to happen when you go to these big, massive events, I guess, definitely in Vegas, is you forget everything you did. You get back home and you're like, okay, what actions am I taking after all these great things I learned from the booths, from talking to other people and my peers? I would say quickly within a week or so of you getting back from Enterprise Connect, get together with the rest of whoever the decision committee is for a particular investment you guys are exploring, and put your heads together on some of the vendors you met with. so that you can engage with them and start doing the next step. Because you're going to get a booth demo. Sure, they've proven that it's not, just a concept, but they're going to need to do something that's more custom to you with your data and things like that next. So get with your decision partners and start engaging the 2 or 3 that you like the best.
Eric, such good advice. Do a little bit of research ahead of time. It doesn't have to be exhaustive, but check in on a few sources of truth to say, hey, where do you maybe want to spend your time? I love pressure testing once you get onto the expo hall floor and show me what's real, not what's maybe a really nice slide deck, but actually out in the wild. And then coming back closely after the event, bringing the right stakeholders together and figure out the plan. That, I think, is the key to success for Enterprise Connect. Eric, I am looking forward to being with you in Las Vegas. Thank you so much for sharing some of your perspective with me today.
Always great to chat with you, Justin.
Awesome. Thank you.